Supergirl Episode 2 Stronger Together. This was an interesting second episode. I think the show, I found out after the premiere, had like the highest ratings for any new fall TV show, which is really good and unsurprising as far as I'm concerned, because I think any superhero show is going to have like super high ratings. Especially with kind of how they show things off. Like, it seemed like it would show off a lot of the great powers of Supergirl, so I wasn't surprised by that. And it was admittedly sort of an okay episode, and then we had this second one, and I think I kind of enjoyed this one a little bit more than I did the first episode, which is really good. That's always great that you like the second episode better than the premiere. And I think the reason I enjoyed it is because we got to see Kara kind of go through, in this episode, a bit of a metamorphosis just, in this episode alone about who she is as Supergirl and what abilities she truly has to help the people of her city. And she learns lessons from everyone around her. She learns a pretty tough lesson, tough love lesson from her sister for sure, which was definitely one of my favorite scenes when they have that sort of kryptonite training ground and she has to learn with her sister and stuff, which of course comes into play when she has to fight against her aunt. We get a super fight between her and her aunt. They're flying around and lots of CG flying and lasers and stuff. We got the cross laser thing where they they're shooting lasers at each other and the lasers like meet in the middle. So that's a very nice, just Superman wise, whether it's Superman, Supergirl, any version of Superman and Supergirl. Always really cool to get that where they're shooting lasers at someone or some other villain can shoot lasers from their eyes. They always meet. That's always actually pretty entertaining to me. So it was nice that they kind of put that sort of super staple in there, and I was like, that's pretty cool that they put it in the second episode. We had a lot of kryptonite actually for this episode. We had like the training facility. The one guy, he had a full-on knife made out of kryptonite, which actually looked super cool. Like, just the design for that was like, it was like a military knife. It wasn't like, oh, let's just carve this into a sharp point. It had like a little curve on it and everything. I was like, they put a lot of design work into that kryptonite blade to make it like an actual military style knife. And I was like, that's actually really cool. Unfortunately, this kryptonite has now been taken by Kara's aunt. I totally can't remember her name. It's something crazy. It's like, it's not Altos. It's something with an A, I believe. But now they have this weapon, so they're going to work on this, and it's like, okay, well, this weakens me, so it's definitely going to weaken my niece. And that's not good. That's never good when the villain knows your weakness. And, of course, that just means that she's not going to go out as often, and it's like, okay, well, send some of these random superpowered henchmen and, break this knife off into a bunch of little points, or use some form of technology on their ship and locate other forms of kryptonite, other, areas that have kryptonite that is, come from Krypton. So I'm looking forward to how that's going to play out, because it's definitely going to play a part now that they know that this is a weakness of Kryptonians. They're going to use that against Supergirl, and hopefully it's not overused, and of course it can't be because they only have like this much of it. So I'm hoping it's not like every villain gets like a little fragment of, kryptonite. That would kind of be stupid. And based on what we saw just from the first episode, that guy had a blade that was able to cut through Kara. So these people have abilities that can rival that of, Kryptonians, even if they have super strength and stuff, and they gain like insane abilities because of our sun. There's still other species out there that can take them on. And the one in this episode was kind of an insect-based creature who seemed, he was kind of fairly weak. Honestly, he didn't have much to do with the plot. Aside from, like, kidnapping Kara's sister. That was about it. Like, he attacks the truck. He does the normal TV thing where he shot, like, a million spikes in there. But, of course, he missed, like, the two people that matter, which are, like, the commander of the company. I'm totally not even bothering to remember any names for the show just yet. But like, the commander, he totally missed. I think he got hit in the leg, maybe. And then Kara's sister, once again, can't remember her name. Or maybe she was the one that got hit in the leg. One of them got hit in the leg. Everyone else in the truck got totally wiped out. And, she gets kidnapped, and that's pretty much all there was to it. He did have some cool powers, though, because he could, like, jump around and stuff. So that was actually pretty fun to watch. I like the fact that he was ultimately defeated by Kara's sister, that was like super cool. I was like, that made her even more badass because I liked her character anyway. And this episode made me like her more because she was trying to teach Kara, like, you can't just be Supergirl. You can't just be ultimately strong and invincible because you're definitely not, which we've seen. And so I already liked that scene where she was like sparring with her and trying to show her, if you're put in a situation where you're fighting a superior opponent, use their power against them. And then we had this scene where she totally did that against this alien creature. And she takes this guy out, and I'm pretty sure she took one of the spikes out and like stabbed him in the neck or something like that. So he got killed off, and she totally won. I was like, that was really sweet. Like, she was able to defeat this alien species that she's never encountered before. And she came out on top because she's super badass. So I was like, I like that. That made it even cooler. Like I said, the fight scene between Kara and her aunt, definitely fun. Love that. The lesson, of course, came back into play. If you're fighting against a superior opponent, use their power, against them. That's what she does, and it kind of helps turn the tide a little bit. And ultimately, they have this minor victory. They won the battle, but we still have a huge war coming on. And now that the enemies have kryptonite, they know how that's going to affect Kara and her place as Supergirl. So looking forward to that coming into play and how it's going to affect the characters and just how difficult it's going to be for them to kind of work things out. But looking forward to that. I liked a lot of the lessons that Kara learned from everyone in this episode. My favorite were, of course, from her sister, but she learned stuff from Jimmy where it's like, sometimes you kind of just have to be your own person and do things the way that you want to do them. And he was kind of teaching her a lesson by working the way that he wanted to, because Cat Grant is like, I want you to get an interview with Supergirl or you're fired. So he was kind of teaching her a lesson through his sort of inability to be controlled for not getting like this insane interview, which ultimately she does help out because she doesn't want him to get fired, or because she doesn't want to do something. But he teaches her, like, the reason that Clark is able to be Clark Kent and all his only disguise is just some simple glasses, is because people never see Clark Kent as this powerful creature in front of them. Like, they don't see him as Superman. They see him as feeble, sort of timid Clark Kent, great reporter, but just a timid, quiet guy. And I love that. I was like, that that's just a simple lesson. It kind of made the stupid costume actually seem like it made sense. It was like the first time I've ever heard that, where someone gave an explanation for how the glasses work, and it's like, that I could actually believe that, like a tiny bit at least. It's the most plausible thing I've heard, and it's still not great because it's still just glasses, but it was like, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone give an example of how the glasses work as his entire disguise. And it made sense to me. It's like, they don't believe that this man is Superman because this man doesn't show that amazing strength and confidence, and neither do you when you're at work. So if you as Supergirl show up to Cat Grant and you look her straight in her eyes, she's not going to have any idea that this is her little assistant Kara, because that's not who you are. When you're Supergirl, you're Supergirl, and when you're Kara, you're a totally different person. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Still totally illogical because they're glasses, but it was the first time that's ever made sense, at least somewhat. And so I ton of respect for that line, even though it still doesn't defeat glasses and versus no glasses. It just doesn't. But it at least helped. I was like, I do at least like that idea, and that's why it always works. So she got the lesson from him. Cat Grant was basically just kind of being Cat Grant and just saying, like, she just needs to think about what she's doing. She can't just go in gung-ho because she's not Superman. He's been here for a long time doing stuff. She comes in trying to be him. She should probably start off really simple and, save some cat and trees, and, save some kittens, stop some minor robberies. Start small. Don't go for the tanker, which you're just going to completely rip apart, which wasn't the best. Like, not the best. We did get to see her try and use the cool, the cool breath, which I thought was, or the freeze breath, I guess makes more sense. I thought that was cool. I love that scene though, because everyone's kind of treating her like, everyone's being kind of a dick in that first scene with the tanker, and they're like, this is what's happening, that's what's happening, like, and then the guy was just like, what are you doing, like, help. And he was just like instantly mad at her, like she's supposed to, like, granted she is a superhero, that would kind of happen with people where it's like, you got superpowers, you should automatically know exactly how to help, but you're not gonna know that just because you jumped into it. And I loved when she tried to freeze everything, and there's just a person in the background like the fires kind of expand a little. It's like, oh, you're making it worse, and I was like, that's just really funny. And then it was like, great, she's saving everything, she's doing it. She's like, all right, that didn't work. I'm gonna move the tanker. I'm gonna move the whole thing. I was like she recovered. Like I was like, that's really cool. She thought on her feet, she recovered, and then boom, she broke the whole front off the boat. Oil spilling into the water, destroying like an entire ecosystem. And the first thing I thought, honestly, was like, maybe she could just freeze that right now. Of course, she couldn't have done like laser, because if she did that with heat, she would have set the whole thing on fire. Which, if she did that, I honestly would have thought that was hilarious. But it would have been so messed up if she did. But I was like, man, she could try to freeze the water and just take a chunk out. But that didn't happen either, and it was just like a huge mess up for her. And then, she does work through it. Her coworker, he didn't really give her too many lessons. He kind of just helped her out as far as, like the police banners and stuff like that, and knowing like, oh, this crime is happening here and this is happening there. So, not really any lessons. I think there was like one thing that he said, I believe, but I don't exactly remember what it was. I don't think he gave her like any true lessons. He was kind of just helping her out this episode. So, he's kind of just like comic relief at this point. He hasn't really, I mean, he's helped. I can't say he hasn't helped, but he didn't give like an inspirational lesson like the other characters did this time. But he certainly did a lot to help. He, the policeman and stuff, definitely did his job in this episode to help say like, this is what's happening here. Cat in the tree. He thought it was a cat in the tree and ends up being a snake, which I love that scene. I was like, and he said the same thing like, well, who names a snake Fluffy or something like that. And I was like, that does make a lot of sense. And it was just like a funny little scene. But it was cool. Like, she was, she got her lesson from Kat, and she was working her way up through some really small things, getting, higher and higher. Great example that Kat said was like when she saved the airplane, and she was like, yeah, she saved the plane, and then she just flew away and left it in the water, and they have crews still trying to clean it up from, last week or something. And I was like, man, that didn't even occur to me until she said that, like, that is something that you shouldn't do. Like, she saved the plane for sure, but she definitely should have flown it to wherever the nearest airport was or something. And I was like, huh, like, holy crap, that's actually, that kind of makes sense. Or at least waited until everyone got off and then did it. That way, if it fell, she could, people wouldn't be like, we're effing falling and dying again. But I was like, holy crap, that makes a lot of sense. But I did enjoy this episode more than the last. The action was good. Like I said, we got, super versus super Kryptonian fight. Very awesome, very fun to see. Lots of great lessons. We're going to have some really big interview report in the next episode because, of course, Kat got the interview that she wanted. So that's going to be like, she's going to be on like cloud 9 for at least the first scene, maybe. And then she'll probably kind of go right back to like, do this, do that, and, don't suck. But I enjoyed this episode. It was definitely, not that the first episode sucked or anything like that. And the first episode, technically, I think had better action. And it was probably just because she kept getting thrown through stuff, so it just looked kind of cool. But I think this one kind of had some better stuff. I'm never, admittedly, the biggest fan of, like, flying in movies. Because it's really hard to do live action flying. Because either you're on wires, and it's difficult for it to look really good, or it's totally CG. And it's, when you throw CG in and it's not like a giant, multi-billion-dollar type of movie or something, it's never like the greatest thing ever to see like CG flying. So it's like, it's always really iffy. And that did occur a little bit in this episode because they were flying for like quite a bit. They were just like on wires, just like punching each other. And it didn't look the greatest to me, but it was still kind of cool because it was like, well, they are still at least flying though. It's still two people in the air like fighting each other. So in one regard, it was like just the normal thing I always get when I see like live action flying. But at the same time, it was also still pretty cool. Like, we had a scene, and they would kind of mix it up where they'd be like punching, and then it would be like a super punch, and Kara would get like thrown. Like when she was thrown out the building, I like that scene because she got tossed straight out the building, and then like a second later, she like flew right back in, and it was super fast. And I was like, I like how that looked because she got thrown out, she flew through the wall, and then she came right back, and she did a nice little counter. And I was like, that actually looked really cool. It's just the way they shot it was actually pretty nice. But definitely enjoyed this episode. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And for this episode, like, my big question for you guys is, what is going to happen now that the villains have kryptonite? Like, I'm assuming that, like I said, they're probably going to have some machine. It's like, here's what this chemical, compound is. Here's, we're going to search the earth for the same sort of signals, and boom, they find more kryptonite to fight against Kara. And like I said, I don't think they're going to be like every villain gets kryptonite, and then they probably won't even be able to find other kryptonite for quite some time. So they're going to have little fragments, probably for like maybe 2 villains, possibly 3, and then they'll save like that last sliver until they fix something or whatever, and then it's like, now we can find more, so let's, use this to find the rest of the kryptonite we need. But I think it's going to lead to some interesting challenges for Kara, and what I'm really hoping for is that it leads to her fighting against villains that don't have super strength, they just have certain abilities, but she's going to train, with her sister, and she'll learn like actual hand-to-hand combat, because that's what I was hoping for when she was training. I was like, they're going to teach her hand-to-hand combat, and I love like martial arts and stuff like that. I don't expect it to be like full-on martial arts or anything, where she's doing like spin kicks and stuff like that. But I love hand-to-hand combat no matter what. Like, good choreographed hand-to-hand fights, always very awesome to me. So I'm hoping that we get some of those through kryptonite, where, and granted, kryptonite does weaken them, so it would be hard for them to do that. It would have to be kind of like what they did in this episode, where somehow, they had this little bit of kryptonite from the knife, so maybe it's just enough to affect Kara at least. Similar to blue kryptonite, which turns Kryptonians, or basically gives Kryptonians, it strips them of like their amazing abilities. It kind of just makes them like normal humans. So unless they kind of do it that way, where they have to break up this knife and then kind of, to have at least enough to turn her human, is basically diluted, and it's only like 20% or whatever they did in this episode. Maybe that's how they'll play it, and we'll get some cool hand-to-hand fights. I'm sure we'll get just the generic, boom, here's a bunch of kryptonite, and she can barely even move, and someone will have to come in and help her out. But I'm looking forward to it. I know there's a lot of possibilities, especially with kind of the introduction to that room that they did, which I'd never seen anything like that, where it's like, this is basically, diluted kryptonite at like 20% or something, and it kind of just turns her human. So, considering they introduced that, I hope we get that from the villain side as well, and it forces them to make really good choreographed fights. But I want to know, where you guys think the villains are going to take their, new and very effective weapon, because obviously kryptonite is either kryptonite or magic, and I can't wait till they get to magic, because that's just going to mean some crazy new villain. But for now, we got our generic kryptonite, and I want to know where you guys think they're going to take that. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.